You are now listening to the Where's the Line podcast with Joseph West and Britt Dillard. Enjoy the show.
Milton gonna take a shot wide open and just strutting in is Keaton. Joe Milton does it again.
Orgy again on a blitz. Levis pocket collapses. He's on the run. He just heaves it up. And it's intercepted by Vanderbilt. And let the celebration begin. The streak is over at 26. The Commodores win it.
Talk about Vanderbilt football. All I gotta say, and you're going to hell. Bye.
Another edition of Where's the Line? It is Wednesday, November 20th. This is episode number 145. My name is Britt Dillard. I'm joined here by the great and powerful Joseph West. How are you today, brother?
Thank you for that great intro, Britt. I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. I'm great even. Thanksgiving is coming up. We're excited about that.
Christmas.
Today's Wednesday, which is Survivor Day, a great day in the Dillard household. Everything is great. Everything is great.
It's hump day for me. That means you're halfway through the work week, a little bit over into the day here. So I'm done working. Britt's done working. We've made it halfway. Just 2 more days to go. We made it. We made it, basically. That's all I can say.
Wednesday, great day of the week. Thursday, arguably the best day of the week. Friday's Friday.
Friday is legendary because Friday, you just like, I know people sometimes say Friday's overrated. I feel like it's ridiculous because Friday, you can just see the light. Like football, especially right now, football's the next day. It's just, it's awesome.
Friday's when screw Thursday. Friday's when all the plans are made.
Yep.
Friday night.
Going. Yep. You're out with your lady or you're out trying to pick up ladies, either way, depending on if you're, single or not.
If you're gay or if you're a woman.
Yeah. Very true. Depending on, what your preferences are, that matters as well these days. But enough about political correctness and all this other jazz. We're here to talk about football. Okay. We don't have many episodes left. We don't really know exactly how many we have, but we have some. And we're going to talk about football. This past weekend, Georgia, Tennessee, in Athens. Great atmosphere down there. Was a pretty good game overall. Maybe not necessarily close late, depending on exactly who you ask, but 31-17 final this past Saturday. 17-17 at half. Vols took a early 10-0 lead at the end of the first quarter. Just kind of give an overview of the game. I think when you look at this game for me, and we'll get Britt's 2 cents right after, when you look at this game for me, tale of 2 halves. I mean, as far as what you saw from Tennessee, specifically on both lines of scrimmage, with the work that they did, especially just in the first quarter, was really impressive. And then you kind of saw it slack off some. Also, just to add this in, Carson Beck made throws that he hadn't made all year as well, or not in several weeks. He has made them some this year, but he just hasn't made them in several weeks. The first touchdown pass he threw to Delp was an NFL caliber throw. He hasn't made that throw a lot this year. And so when he did that, I said, that's what I told my dad, I said, that's what Tennessee doesn't need. That's what they didn't need to happen. They didn't need him to turn into the quarterback that you've seen him be, but you've never seen him do it consistently. So, tale of 2 halves for sure, but that's just kind of the opener for me.
Yeah, going into the game, most of the talk was about Carson Beck. and Tennessee's defensive line. Those are kind of the two biggest talking points that I know I was interested in. Carson Beck played a really good game. I think there was a point where we were still in wait and see mode on which version of Carson Beck we were going to get. Were we going to get the version we've seen all year, or the guy that we saw the second half of Alabama and for most of last year? But I think it was in the first or second quarter, big third down. Carson Beck picks it up on his feet, and at that moment, I was like, okay, that's a big moment for Carson Beck and for this game. And he made great throws. He wasn't pressured. Tennessee's defensive line really just no-showed Saturday. They just give Georgia credit. I mean, they did not allow Carson Beck to have any pressure that I can remember in this game. They used tight ends. They didn't do anything flashy. They just had tight ends, and Carson Beck just kind of sat back there and picked you apart. Felt pretty good after the 10-0 start. It felt like after that, as Georgia kind of started going back and forth, it felt like kind of a heavyweight matchup. But outside of the late touchdown, I still think it was a fairly close game on the field, at least. I personally, and I'm not going to get into it too much, it was a pretty lopsided affair. I can handle officiating being bad. Officiating has been bad the last 3 years in every game that's been played. But when the announcers just flat out suck and are one-sided, that just makes me so mad. And Tennessee fans like to play the card of everybody hates Tennessee. Like Kirk Herbstreit and Fowler hate Tennessee, and the refs hate Tennessee. It's not that. It's just you were on the road against a team that's better than you, and they were beating you, and they were just soaking it up. But
Yeah.
Chris Fowler sucked. He was terrible. Kirk Herbstreit, we like you. I think Tennessee fans like you. You were pretty bad.
I feel like everybody likes Kirk Herbstreit for the most part. I mean, he's a pretty likable guy, I feel like. Just shout out Kirk Herbstreit for a second.
I would say historically, Chris Fowler is pretty loved. I went to bat
true.
for him in the group message a few weeks ago, but he's just terrible. Whoever the officiating guy was in the booth was atrocious. He was absolutely atrocious. There's been several plays pointed out on Twitter and all this stuff, whatever. He touched his face mask. It could have been called or not called a face mask, but he touched his face mask. There is no 3-second rule for substitutions. We've done it all year. Teams have done it against us all year. If you let the defense sub and they want a free 5 yards, it's theirs. They can have all the time they want to sub. That's completely made up. And teams have done that against Tennessee for the last 2 years. But I don't want to be the guy to sit here and complain. Georgia is a very good team. I don't think anybody really slotted Georgia in as a win at any point this season. It's on the road at night. Josh Heupel can't do it. Josh Heupel's biggest road win is at LSU at noon against Brian Kelly at noon. So not spectacular, just to say the least. But Tennessee's got everything out in front of them. We're going to get into some college football playoff stuff, but it's disappointing. Like I said last week, the elite coaches will win this game. Tennessee had a great opportunity to establish themselves as an elite team and as a contender, and they just didn't do it. I didn't think Nico played a bad game. I don't think he played out of his mind. It was kind of a Joe Milton style game. I mean, he made throws. He's tough. Nico is very tough. I think he showed us that the last 2 weeks. He can take hits. He's not the delicate flower that most listeners of this podcast pretended like he was last year, but he's got to be better. Nico, he has to be better at throwing balls downfield, and there were several throws Saturday that he just flat out missed.
Yeah.
He has to be better.
Before we get too far away from it, I would like to talk about two different things. One, the refs. I've commented on the refs multiple times on this podcast and how bad they have been. This game was certainly no exception to how bad the refs have been this year. Once again, I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times on this pod. Refs have no accountability right now. That has to be fixed. It's simple. If you want this problem to be fixed, you make an overall ref association for all of college football. No more conference refs. I've seen enough of this bull crap. It's too bad. The problem that Britt is saying right now, and I think some UT fans have taken it overboard, but I think the main problem that Britt is stating is he doesn't mind the rules if it's called consistently. So I did a lot of research into the substitution rule this week. Have no idea exactly where people are getting this, but I went back to, actually kind of funny, a Vol Nation report from October 30th of 2023 that I found, where it says the rule specifically allows 3 seconds for the defense to react to the substitution, and that 3 seconds begins once the offense is substituted and their players have been on the field. So you get 3 seconds to react. So you get 3 seconds to start sending players in, essentially.
So that's where that came from.
And then so from there, the defense must be given a reasonable amount of time to substitute their players. So first of all, what does that even mean? And second of all, how in the world, if I was writing up a set of rules, the last thing I would do is put something like reasonable amount of time in there. What is that even? Who is to say what a reasonable amount of time is? The whole point of this is, one, Britt is right. I have seen other teams do it. I've seen teams do it against Vandy when you get late in the play clock and you start substituting slow. The biggest thing to me is that you should not be able to. So the 3 seconds goes by, and then Heupel starts substituting players. So you're saying, okay, he didn't start in the first 3 seconds. So then when is his reasonable time gone? That needs to be cleared up. We need to discuss this in the offseason. What is a reasonable amount of time? Is it 5 seconds? To me, as soon as those players get on the field and your coaches have enough time to say this is the personnel they're going to be in, okay, you've got 5 seconds for your players to get on and off the field. And after that, we're letting it go. After that, you've got no more time. Throw out a number, though. That way there's no questions about exactly what the rule is or exactly what we're talking about or anything like that. Because I think, to me, the biggest problem all year has just been consistency. Like, I was watching the Georgia game and the Georgia UT game this weekend. Tennessee called Hutt, and one of their receivers were looking to the sideline. I'm like, where's the shoulders not squared flag? Literally, I just started screaming it. I was like, where's the shoulders not squared flag? Only reason I care about that is because it was called on Vandy. If you call that in every game, I'm not mad. That's the thing. That's my only, my bone to pick with the refs is, please be consistent. I feel like people would be less mad if you were more consistent about your calls.
And we're not stupid. Everybody watching that game knows what was happening. We were trying to get a delay of game. It was completely trying to bend the rules to gain something. So I don't think it should be a flag on us just because we know the rules and we're trying to benefit from it. If anything, referees stand over the football all the time. Just stand over the football till both teams have said, okay, we're subbed, we're good. Then have a 10-second play clock. It shouldn't be a flag. The Carson Beck false start that wasn't called made me more mad than any. That's really the only one that I truly had a problem with. That was just blatantly obvious. There was another defensive holding on Tennessee that we had 2 defensive linemen getting choke slammed. It looked like Dwayne Johnson. It looked like rock bottom. And I see a flag thrown. I'm rejoicing. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. We finally got a call. No, holding defense. And it was like every flag that was called was at the worst possible time for Tennessee. And it piled up. It's hard to overcome that on the road at night against freaking Georgia. It just was a nightmare scenario. Josh Heupel's too timid. Punting on 4th and 4 or 5 from the 35 on the first drive after halftime is completely unacceptable. Especially when the first play after the punt is a 15-yard run, and they're right where you would have been if you would have turned the ball over, or if you didn't convert. That's completely insane.
It's cowardice. I mean, I've complained about that from Vanderbilt coaches every day. If you're from the 50 and in, and you're not confident to kick a field goal, we're going for it every single time. We will never punt. You cannot benefit from a punt unless in that range from inside of their 50, unless your punter is an absolute menace and he can punt it inside the 5 every time. But you better be sure that he can down it at the 5 or less or better. Because if he doesn't, it's a wasted punt. It's a wasted punt. So I hate it. A weird stat about this game is that Tennessee had 5 sacks and Georgia had 0. And you look at the stat sheet and you're like, that doesn't really make any sense.
That doesn't make sense.
I mean, it literally makes no sense. Tennessee had 319 total yards compared to Georgia's 453. 167 passing yards for Tennessee, 152 rushing, 347 passing yards for Georgia. Britt was not kidding when he said Carson Beck. I mean, in the second half, he had a lot of time to throw. A couple times it was just the corners getting beat. They got good pressure, but a lot of the times, too, it was Tennessee's defensive line getting manhandled outside of Pierce, who was catching doubles. And, I mean, I said on this podcast, and I believe Britt said that is a key, is that other guys were going to have to step up with Pierce. Other dudes were going to have to step up, and they did. I mean, you just got no action from anybody else as far as the defensive line goes. I think that, this definitely puts where the whole playoff look is at. And let's just go ahead and get into that next, Britt, playoff once we're done with Georgia and Tennessee. But it definitely puts Tennessee in a weird spot with how everything else is kind of, panning out here. But, I mean, this game really wasn't that lopsided. I mean, total plays, Tennessee had 72, Georgia had 71. Time of possession was 29-30 for Tennessee, 30-29 for Georgia. I mean, when you look at the stat sheet, it's like, oh, this was a pretty even game. This was a field goal game, wasn't it? No, it was somehow a 2-touchdown game. It really was just the tale of two halves. I think that, I don't know if you got any new red flags from Tennessee outside of the defensive line just not being able to do much in the second half. But I wouldn't necessarily say that's a red flag. It's just you played an offensive line that's better. I think that's just better.
Tennessee's biggest red flag, and I don't want anyone to think too deep into this. Your biggest red flag is Josh Heupel's coaching decisions. That's your biggest red flag.
Yeah.
And a huge red flag is you're about to play your 11th game, and I wouldn't say you've played a complete game. So if you've played 11 games and you still haven't had what I think should be a complete game, maybe you're just not as good as I think we are. That's a pretty big red flag for me. I mean, Nico has thrown over 200 yards. I don't know how many times, not many.
Yeah.
Especially in Power 5 games. In SEC games, I don't know if he has.
Yeah, when you're 20 of 33 for 167 yards, and I'm sorry, actually. By the way, I read that backwards earlier. Tennessee got sacked 5 times. Tennessee had 0
that makes
sacks.
a lot more sense.
I apologize on that. I just realized that I said that backwards. I apologize on that, guys. Nico got sacked 5 times. Carson Beck was never sacked. Just to clarify that, I apologize. But yeah, when you're 20 of 33 for 167 yards, I think that's enough. A lot of times, though, you can't tell a performance of the quarterback just by the stat sheet. Nico made, you said it earlier, Britt, how many overthrows would you say he made, or misses? Maybe not necessarily just overthrows, but he had a couple. I wouldn't say it was a ton, but I mean it was a couple. That's just something that you've seen pop up consistently. A very consistent thing of this podcast has been Nico's got to make that throw, whether it's 1 or 2 throws here or 1 or 2 throws there. You're like, he's just got to make that. And maybe it's unrealistic because he's a freshman, but you're just expecting him to make some of those. When my thing, I said this to a UT fan yesterday. I just said, look, if I was paying my quarterback that much money, I expect him to make that throw. I don't care how old he is. I don't care if he's 17, Ryan Williams at quarterback. If he's getting paid that much money, he's making the throw. Or his pay is going down. It's really simple. Like, these are 1-year contracts essentially on NIL. Your pay's going down if you can't make this throw. Or you can hit the road and we'll pay somebody else less money for the same production. So that's the way I would look at it. I'm not saying that Tennessee by any means should say Nico take a pay cut or he's transferring. But I would have a serious talk about, hey, man, in the offseason, if you don't make some throws this next year, some big-time NFL throws, we'll be expecting you to take a pay cut. I mean, it's simple.
And I think Nico has made some good throws, and he
has too.
He has thrown over 200 yards once in conference play, and that was against Kentucky. It's I don't know, the play calling and it's not even as much as the run versus pass percentage. It's the type of pass plays that we run are infuriating. You're throwing it 30 yards across the line of scrimmage to get 2 yards out of bounds. You're just not taking enough deep shots, and I just don't think we have much confidence in our receivers. Dante Thornton had a terrible, terrible drop. Squirrel White, his feet leave the ground anytime the ball is thrown towards him. I'm so sick of watching Squirrel White play football. Mike Matthews is on the bench. He's probably the second or third best receiver you got, and he's sitting on the bench. But Nico, he has to be better. Play calling has to be better. It's just having a great punter and a great defense has killed Josh Heupel's imagination. It's disappointing. Now, I don't want to be too negative because I think Tennessee has a lot in front of them. I personally think Tennessee, if they win out, will have a very good shot to be in the college football playoff. But that is a very hot topic of discussion since Tuesday night. And the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams and making Tuesday night such a big television event is pretty cool. I think it's pretty awesome. It's good content. It's good talking points. Ward Manuel's a loser. Michigan's athletic director is a big fat Shrek loser. And he's an idiot. I'll say that. He's the commissioner of the college football playoff.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know.
He's an idiot.
Before we get too deep into the college football playoff, I would like to talk about one thing, Britt, about this game, and it doesn't deal with Tennessee at all. I just want to talk about transfers. And the reason I want to talk about transfers when it comes to Georgia is because there are two wide receivers on Georgia's team that transferred to Georgia. One by the name of London Humphreys from Vandy, and one by the name of Dominic Lovett from Missouri. Dominic Lovett in 2022, his second year at Missouri after his freshman year, had 56 receptions for 850 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging 15.1 yards per catch. This year at Georgia, he has 45 receptions, 489 yards, and 3 touchdowns. His production is certainly down by about 400 yards. Does have 2 games to go, though. London Humphreys is a true freshman at Vandy, 22 receptions, didn't really get to play till halfway through the season. And get a lot of snaps. 22 receptions, 439 yards for an average of 20 yards per catch with 4 touchdowns. This year at Georgia, 11 catches, 214 yards, 1 touchdown. I just want to know why we keep believing the lie that these big programs are selling you, that the grass is going to be so much greener and you're going to catch way more balls because the offensive line and the quarterback's better. You've just been fed lies. You continue to believe it. Your production's way down. 11 catches for 214 yards is not getting anybody drafted. I just had to say one game. I like that. I just had to say that because it really has bugged me that I've watched guys transfer and produce half the numbers and just really be like, why would you pass up what you know was working for some myth? That there's no way that you believed it was actually going to happen. Like in theory, okay, but realistically, it's not happening. So forget both of them. They were Georgia's 2 leading receivers. London Humphreys made a big catch actually on the false start play of Carson Beck. That was a false start where he fell before the snap or something. But regardless, he's still whack for leaving his hometown to go to Georgia, and Dominic Lovett is also whack for leaving Missouri to go to Georgia. So I wanted to harp on both of them that good job transferring. Your NFL draft stock is going down, not up. So good job to both of you. Now we may talk about the playoff.
The college football playoff is a 12-team playoff. Would you agree?
It is a 12-team playoff. I mean, there's nothing to debate there.
It is a 12-team playoff. There are issues with it. There are issues with the 4-team. but I do think it provides more entertainment. A lot more teams that, I mean, Tennessee would be looking at what bowl are we going to go to against some crappy Big Ten team that will destroy. Um, I mean, teams like Tennessee, Texas A&M, SMU, BYU, Colorado, all these teams that are kind of on the fringe of the current rankings this week. All those teams are still thinking, how are we going to get in and compete for the national championship? So I think that's good. I think it's good for the sport. There are some issues that I have with it. Number one, a group of 5 team should not have an automatic bid in the college football playoff. Now, getting the top 12, okay, that's fine. Boise State is a fringe. What was Boise State ranked? Hold on, I've got it right here. So Boise State's at 12. Okay, that's fine. Get in. Any other, like, I don't know. First of all, Boise State should not, this year, they should not have a Heisman Trophy winner, and they probably shouldn't make the playoff because they've played one good team in Oregon and got beat. That's just my opinion. And this year, I'm not sure. We put such a big premium on losses, on the quality of losses. It seems like more this year than any other years. So Tennessee lost to Arkansas, who's 5-5, and they lost to Georgia, who is ranked 10th, and they are 8-2 currently. Arkansas is not a good loss. It's just not. And there's a lot of people saying, well, if you would have beat Arkansas, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Okay, that's not telling me anything. I know that loss sucks. But Tennessee's 10-2. Your best wins are Alabama and probably Oklahoma on the road. That second loss isn't great. It is what it is.
If you're 10-2, I would argue that your second best win is Vandy over Oklahoma. Me personally, I mean, I would argue you said 10-2. That means you beat Vandy and UTEP. I would argue that that's a better win than Oklahoma.
Could be. And my mind wasn't exactly looking at Vanderbilt. But there's 4 SEC teams ahead of you: Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Georgia. Obviously, Georgia beats you. They have a better resume than you. They should be in over you. Ole Miss has a great win at Georgia, or at home against Georgia. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. And nobody's talking about it. Ole Miss lost to a 3-win Kentucky team at home. A Kentucky team who has beaten 1-9 Southern Miss, 7-3 Ohio, 1-10 Murray State, and apparently playoff lock Ole Miss. So 4-win, not 3-win.
Ole Miss is only a lock if they escape the swamp this weekend, and I don't think that's a gimme game. Truly, I don't think it's a gimme game at all. I think they could easily drop a game this weekend in the swamp and go home really hurting about their playoff chances. I know that. Are Tennessee fans rooting for Florida this weekend?
Yeah.
Hold on. I mean, you pretty much have to. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and if you're a smart bettor, if you like to make money, and a sneak peek to the end of this podcast, you will put your mortgage on Ole Miss to beat Florida. You will put every dime you have on Ole Miss to beat Florida.
War Tom, I disagree. I have the other side of that. We will get to that later. But I like Cover 3. If you never listen to Cover 3, if you like good betting picks and you don't trust me and Britt, go to Cover 3. They have a great betting segment, and every time they disagree, they say war. I really like it. But anyways, looking at the college football projected bracket right now, you've got first round matchups would be Notre Dame as the 8 seed, Alabama as the 9, Ohio State is the 5, BYU is the 12, with on the same side of their bracket, Oregon on a bye as the 1, and Boise State on a bye as the 4. On the other side, Indiana, Ole Miss, that's the 7 and 10 seed, with Indiana being the 7. Penn State being the 6, with Georgia the 11 in the first round, and then waiting for Georgia and Penn State, Miami, and waiting for Ole Miss or Indiana would be Texas. So if it started today, that's what we would see. I will say the only real problem I have with the playoff right now is so the things that I think matter are strength of schedule certainly matters, right? Like, I don't think anyone can debate that. Who you lose to certainly matters in this instance. And so who has the worst loss? Who has the hardest schedule? And And honestly, that's the only two real things I care about. So in my opinion, I look at it and I say, okay, this is how they should be ranked. Georgia should be the best team out of the. I think we're talking only SEC teams, by the way. Throw everybody who's not in the SEC out the window. Georgia should be the first ranked SEC team because they have the hardest strength of schedule, yet the best record.
The number one strength of schedule.
So they have the number one strength of schedule. So why is Georgia not first in the SEC? That's my question.
Georgia, this is going to make me mad. Georgia played Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee. They have the number one strength of schedule. Texas, their two best wins. This is not my take. This is what ESPN put on television last night. Texas's two best wins are at Vanderbilt and against Arkansas. They're using Arkansas as an argument for Texas' best win, and then they're saying it's such a horrible loss for Tennessee. Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. They got dominated by Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is having a great season. Vanderbilt gained a ton of respect this year from how they've played on the field. That Arkansas loss is not that different from getting dominated by Vanderbilt. And I'm not throwing shade to you, Joseph. If you look at how Arkansas and Vandy are compared, it's not that different.
No, I would say we're a better football team than Arkansas, but that doesn't mean that I think the loss is that different because I think those do mean different things as far as like what team is better versus how bad the loss is.
And I know there's a lot of things going on. Like Alabama has more quality wins than Tennessee. I'm not trying to argue Tennessee over Alabama. I'm just trying to understand how Tennessee is not involved in this 4-team cluster of Texas, Bama, Georgia, and Ole Miss. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky.
Yeah. And that's
home.
That's pretty much what I was getting to is if I was ranking the 4 teams, to me, it goes strength of schedule first. So Georgia's 1, no matter what in the SEC, if you ask me. Bama is 2 because they have the next hardest strength of schedule. And
they have quality wins.
And they have quality wins over opponents. They have lost to Tennessee and Vandy and beat all the hard teams that they've played. So there's number 2. 3 is Tennessee. Here's why. They've lost the same amount of games as Ole Miss, but they're one of their losses is not as bad as Kentucky. Arkansas is a better loss, even though there's no good losses. It's a better loss than Kentucky. And Ole Miss would be 4 for me. That's how I would rank them out. I'm not saying that they necessarily have to agree wholeheartedly with me. People have different opinions of how you should rank things. But things we do have to get away from is I will argue that order all day with logic and logic and reasoning. But the argument that doesn't make any sense to me as an individual is arguing that like.
Let me interject. Let me completely interrupt you. Ole Miss's other losses against LSU has lost 3 straight games and probably about to be 4.
That loss looks worse by the week because they are now unranked. So what are we doing calling that a good loss? I agree 100%. But here's what we're not going to do. With all that being said, here's what we're not going to do. Britt kind of did it, but not really. Here's what I don't like. First of all, I will say this. I understand why Tennessee fans are hating on them in particular. I get it. I do. But Ashton Jeanty is the best player in college football. There is not a single player in college football who impacts his team's, the defense's game plan as much as he does. Every single team that they have played all year lines up with 8 and 9 guys in the box. And they say, we're going to stop Jeanty no matter what. We are going to stop this guy. And a lot of teams still haven't stopped him. They still haven't stopped the guy. And they're putting 8 and 9 guys in the box every play. If you don't believe me, don't even have to watch a full Boise State game. Just go look up the highlights and tell me how many guys are in the box or on every play. And even when Jeanty is not getting the ball with 8, 9 guys in the box, the reason their mid receivers have a chance to win is because they're getting one-on-one looks on the outside. And if you're a mid guy, you're going to win some of those. So he is impacting the game even when he's not touching the ball.
And I don't disagree that he's impacting his team as much as anybody, but he's playing on freshman mode, dude. He's in the Mountain West.
Maybe, but my argument is this, is that SEC running backs benefit from having other really talented guys on their team. So like Dylan Sampson is not going against 8 guys in the box. That is no slight to Dylan Sampson. I think he's a phenomenal running back.
But he's playing against SEC linebackers. He's playing against Malachi Moore. He's playing against these guys.
I'm just saying there's an argument for both sides. Like, you can argue, like, I don't think that you can, with logic and reason, I don't think that you can convince me that Genty does not deserve win the Heisman and Boise State does not deserve to be in the playoff. Same thing with Indiana. Indiana has dominated everybody they have played the whole entire season. They have one game that is close. That is Michigan. I believe they beat them by 5.
Great Michigan team.
And they did not play well. And
and Indiana had 20 yards in the second half of that game.
And what was the score of that, Britt? Was it 5 points?
20-15, yeah. My thing is, and
that is their worst game of the season, and they won.
And touching on the Heisman, I think Travis Hunter should win the Heisman. I don't even think. I think he's getting inflated because he plays both sides of the ball. I think he's a really good receiver and a really good cornerback. I don't think he's an elite either. I think he's just a combination, but whatever. Indiana, here's my thing about Indiana. I think that in order for you to make the college football playoff, for any team to make the college football playoff, you have to have at least one win. You've got to beat at least one good team. You can't play the entire schedule and not beat anybody. That's my thing. Now, luckily, the Big Ten scheduling, it's not the Big Ten's fault. The conferences are too big. The conferences are way too big this week. We're going to see. And it's insane to me that in one breath, we're talking about how Indiana is such a dominant team. They dominate everybody they play, and they're undefeated in one of the best 2 conferences in America. And then the conversation shifts to next week they play Ohio State. If they can keep it within 2 touchdowns, they're still in the playoff. If they're such an elite team, why are we already penciling them in to lose by 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, I do think that I do think it's crazy that people are saying that Indiana is going to lose by 2 touchdowns. I'm not a believer of that narrative. I think Cignetti might be one of the best coaches in the country. I'm not ready to put him above Kirby or anything crazy yet, but like I'm putting him in the top 5. I've seen enough.
And I think Cignetti's a good coach, and I think Indiana very well could be a good team. We don't know. They haven't played anybody. Yeah. And that's the thing. The Big Ten has 2 very, very good teams in Oregon and Ohio State. They're the top 2 teams in the country. They're very good. They can beat anybody at any time. Both of those teams could win the national championship. Outside of that, Penn State has beaten nobody. They've beaten nobody. Their best win is Illinois, who they miraculously have put back in the top 25, which is hilarious. They got dominated by Ohio State. The committee's trying to say for Penn State, the argument against Penn State over Tennessee last week, I know it doesn't matter anymore. The argument is that, well, they were undefeated and they went back in this back and forth game, a heavyweight game against Ohio State. Ohio State killed Penn State. It was not a back and forth game. It's not back and forth when Ohio State leads the entire second half. It's not. So I'm not on here to say the Big Ten is so much better or so much worse than the SEC because I think the bottom half of the SEC sucks. I just think that the bottom half of the Big Ten is way, way worse, and that's the only teams. Indiana has played 7 out of the bottom 8 Big Ten teams.
Yeah. And there is, once again, I think to play devil's advocate, there's a whole different side of that because you schedule these games too far out in advance to know. Like I told somebody the other day, if the East was still a thing and we added the 2 teams and then we just added a team to the East and added a team to the West, or actually they would have added both of them to the West and one team in the West would have came to the East with us, was one of the original hypotheticals. So if in that case, Tennessee would have played, or like Vandy or anyone, you can use anyone in the East, would have played Florida, who in the beginning is better now, but it was not good in the beginning of the season with Mertz, who sucked. Kentucky, who sucks. South Carolina, pretty good team. No slight to them. Vandy, below South Carolina, but I wouldn't put them in the same group as Kentucky and Florida. Georgia, anybody else? And then you'd have your 2 West
Tennessee
games. So then you'd have your 2 West games of Tennessee's. One of them would have been Bama, and I think it was their turn to play Arkansas regardless. So the other one probably is Arkansas. So like, I'm just saying there was or even like for the teams in the West, like you would have gotten to play Mississippi State, Auburn, Arkansas.
What are you arguing? It would still be weak.
Missouri. I'm saying their schedule would be no better than Indiana's. Like
But
Mississippi State, Auburn, Missouri, and
in this scenario,
who's the
though,
other team I named?
in this
Arkansas.
in this
No.
scenario, though, Tennessee would play Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Missouri, and Texas, all 5 ranked teams.
Yeah, that was a bad example for Tennessee as an individual team. But I was more saying for the West. The West would have benefited from it more because they would have played Mississippi State, Auburn, Arkansas, Missouri.
Well, the East is better than the West. The hypothetical East.
Yeah.
Some of us
Yeah,
are still
hypotheticals.
fighting for
We're
divisions.
we're still some dogs out here.
So the lack of divisions and the expansion of the conference has made it the scenario where Tennessee's only playing 2 ranked teams in conference this year. I mean, Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah. We might be able to help you out if we can get a win this weekend. We might sneak back in. I think we're at 32. After this weekend, we were 7 spots out of the top 25. So beat LSU. Some teams lose, like Illinois, who could lose this weekend. Maybe we sneak back in.
Yeah, but
one more ranked game.
Talking about Indiana just a little bit more.
Okay. Let's talk about
so
I got them pulled up.
So hold on. So Tennessee lost to Arkansas, bad loss by 5. Arkansas is currently at number 32 on ESPN's FPI, and they have the number 38th strength of record. That's Arkansas, 32 in the FPI. Indiana has played 0 teams ranked higher than Arkansas in either of those categories. So I understand the argument. Indiana, they're going to finish 11-1, assuming they lose to Ohio State. They dominated people. They can only play who they play. Okay, but Tennessee, assuming they go 10-2, lost to Georgia and Arkansas, a team that is better than any of Indiana's wins. How would that team not get in over Indiana? And I'm not saying that they don't. I think they could, but I'm just making an argument for it. But at the end of the day, as many people will tell you, just beat Arkansas, and it doesn't matter.
Listen, I'll say this right here. I was just debating on saying it. I'm saying it. Ryan Day's football team is soft. Give me Indiana this weekend. I think they're more gritty. I think they want it more. I think Ryan Day's soft. I think he's a loser. Jim Harbaugh once said, born on third base, thought he hit a triple. Facts. Okay, this Ryan Day dude is a bum. Get him out of here. I'm riding with Coach Signetti and the boys this weekend. So I think Indiana goes undefeated.
So, okay, in that scenario, 10-2 Ohio State, who've they beat? Penn State. They have one good win.
Great question. Haven't even looked at their schedule. Great question.
The thing that's infuriating, and Texas is benefiting. Texas and Penn State are benefiting from this more than anybody. They were ranked high to start the year, and that's it.
Britt, come to the dark side. We need to do away with preseason rankings. All they do is help teams that don't deserve it and hurt teams that do deserve it. That is my problem.
You've got Penn State, who has literally, they've played Gordonsville High School every week. They haven't beat anybody. The one good team they played destroyed them. But the team that destroyed them gets to look and say, hey, we just beat a top 4 team. We just beat a top 4 Penn State, who was number 3 at the time. But they're not the third best team in the country. They're not. Yeah. If Penn State played Georgia's schedule, they'd go 8-4.
To me, Vanderbilt could almost live from the exact same benefit of you could argue if you would have beat South Carolina this weekend, what I would be arguing right now, or 2 weeks ago, what I would be arguing right now on this podcast is that Vanderbilt is a playoff team if they went out because you lost to number 3 in the nation, or 2 in the nation, whatever Texas is, by 3 points. You beat number 1 Bama at the time, who's now, like number 5 or something? I don't have that pulled up anymore.
Bama
Let me just go see what
7.
both of they are. Okay, so you beat number 7, currently, number 17. You lost to number 3 by 3 points in the nation. And, you lost to Missouri close. The Georgia State game actually didn't happen, is what I would be arguing. So, like, it just doesn't matter. And my thing is, the committee has shown me in the past that games early in the season don't matter. Weeks like 1 through 3, who cares about them? They don't matter. I mean, you can kind of see that with the Kentucky Ole Miss game. They don't matter.
They don't matter,
anymore.
but yet the rankings, what those teams were ranked, matters, like, supremely. I was trying to see who Texas has beat. Texas is benefiting from beating a top 10 Michigan team who is now probably not going to make a bowl game. And it just so happens that Michigan's athletic director is the big fat man at in charge of the college football playoff. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. They've beat a good team. They beat Texas A&M, and I think Texas A&M is a good team. If I'm a Texas A&M fan, I'm saying the same thing, even more magnified. They're sitting at 8-2 with a chance to beat Texas. Why is nobody talking about Texas A&M? So I'm not mad about Notre Dame. They've beat somebody. Alabama's beat somebody. Miami has literally played New Middleton Elementary School every week. Indiana has played Carthage Elementary every single week. Georgia has great wins. Tennessee has a great win. Boise State has beat literally not a single team with a pulse. SMU is sitting at 13, and they have beaten more Power 5 teams than anyone in the country. They have 7 Power 5 wins. Only them and Alabama can say that, which is wild.
That's insane.
South Carolina, I'm just yapping at this point. South Carolina is one. It's a bad call, but it's also a stupid decision to hit Garrett Nussmeier for that flag. They're that one play away from being right there with Tennessee and Ole Miss and Texas A&M. But like we said last week, it's the product as a whole. College football is awesome this year, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think the landscape's awesome. I think this is a lot of fun. I think that really anybody can win it. I do think that Georgia has a really favorable matchup. If obviously it's 2 weeks to go, things can change. Things will change, I think. But their matchup right now, I mean, Georgia would play Penn State in round 1. They will. I don't care if it's at Penn State or not. Kirby Smart will coach circles around James Franklin, and their players are better. They will swing and kill Penn State in the first half, and then they'll play Miami next, who they will also punch one time and KO them in the first half. Their road to the semifinals to play either Texas or Indiana or Ole Miss, whoever came out of that side, which I think could be any of the three. And then I would like Georgia over any of those three teams too. Texas, I like them against them. Ole Miss, I like the rematch, and Indiana, I like Georgia against any of those. So I think the harder brackets, the other side for sure. BYU is a team that, I mean, they're going to win the Big 12, so of course they're getting their spot in. But I think they are the biggest fraud. I was actually kind of a BYU supporter until this weekend. To me, I just can't support you being in the college football playoff when you really don't have any wins against anybody good. Like Britt was talking about Indiana. BYU is arguably worse. They beat Utah by 1. At least Indiana's blowing out their bad opponents. They beat UCF by 16. They beat Oklahoma State by 3. They beat Baylor by 6. Their only good win is Kansas State. They won 38-9. That's it. That's their best win, in my opinion. They'll play Arizona State, who's ranked 21 this weekend. I believe that's according to the AP. So we'll kind of see what they do. And I get it. Like I said, the Big 12 does deserve a spot. All 4 Power 4 conferences should get a spot in the playoff. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying if there's anybody I'm calling the complete fraud in this playoff, I think it's BYU. If Ohio State does beat Indiana this weekend and they stay in the 5 slot there to play BYU as the 12, they will absolutely run BYU's pockets. It will be bad.
I agree with the current setup that the Big 12 and the ACC should get a bid, but whoever wins those 2 conferences, if they play any of the top 4 teams in the Big 10 or the SEC, they lose by more than 3 touchdowns. They get absolutely destroyed. Whether that's Miami, whether that's SMU, whether that's BYU, whether it's Colorado, I don't care who. They get destroyed.
I would heavily bet on Vanderbilt, and I mean heavily, like couple hundreds of dollars, like I bet on them against Auburn, against just about any team in the Big 12, except for maybe one. I would heavily bet Vandy hundreds of dollars of my hard-earned money for any team that they played in the Big 12. I believe they would win, except for maybe BYU. And Vanderbilt's the 8th team in the conference or the 7th team in the conference, something like that. We're sitting right there, 8th, 9th in the conference. So we're sitting right there at halfway, and I'm saying I would take them over every team in the Big 12 except one.
So
that to me,
yeah, that's why to me it's ridiculous to say that they're deserving of a playoff spot. Miami's another team that has just benefited from being ranked highly. I don't even see them on television. I don't even think they air their football games on television.
BYU.
No, Miami. I really don't think anybody cares about Miami football other than the sports games. Media. The only Miami game I watched was in Caesar Sportsbook in Elizabeth, Indiana.
Yeah, I did.
And they lost.
I've watched a couple Miami games. I watched them play Virginia Tech when Virginia Tech got screwed on a Hail Mary.
Oh yeah,
I watched them play. I watched them play Georgia Tech. What was that, last weekend? 2 weekends ago, November 9th. 2 weekends ago, I believe. 2 weekends ago. Watched them play Georgia Tech as well when Georgia Tech beat them. So, I mean, when I look at it, I definitely don't think Miami's good either. ACC sucks. They can get out of here. But, nothing we can do about it. I do think all Power 4 teams should get a spot. That's just the way I look at it. If you win your conference, very similar to NFL, you win your AFC South, you should get in. You win your AFC, East, you get in. West, so on and so forth.
But
you
the NFL is balanced.
It is
relatively.
It is.
College football is
more balanced, but still
not at all
more balanced. Yeah.
Balanced.
No, I agree.
But we're coming up on over 50 minutes here, so let's try to move on from this and talk a little bit about Vanderbilt playing LSU this weekend in Death Valley.
Yes, in Death Valley.
At night.
Live Tigers, night game, super loud environment. The boys have been getting ready. It's been super loud in the indoor, according to guys at Vandy. They've been trying to pump in a lot of crowd noise, just trying to get them ready for the tough environment. I think you look at this game, and as cliche as it is, there are certainly points of attack on both of the lines of scrimmage for Vanderbilt. Had a guy kind of break down the film on LSU last week, and you look at, they just didn't pick up twist and stunts great against Florida a week ago. And so I think when you look at that and how their offensive line handled it, their running backs didn't block well in pass pro. LSU's left guard really struggled with stunts and twists, like I was saying. Their tight end did not like to get physical against Florida. He was soft as well. I think in the run game, Vanderbilt's defense could exploit them. Some guys that could have games, I think, that you're looking for, very similar to Florida's game plan. Randon Fontenette should be a guy that you're dialing up stuff for. CJ Taylor's a guy that you should have near the line of scrimmage, should hopefully have his best game of the season. Biggest thing about this game is going to be it's just how healthy does Vandy look. Vanderbilt had 22 guys sit out of practice last week. That shows you just how much Vanderbilt has been hurt and banged up. It was not ideal, but they were able, hopefully, to all get healthy, take a good week off where none of them practiced. Started practicing again Monday, where they were able to get back in and start focusing on LSU. So, I think this game is going to be a lot about how healthy are we? Can we get stops defensively at the line of scrimmage? Can you bulk up and just do what you have to do? Offensive line, I think that there are ways to exploit LSU in the run game as well. LSU hasn't been fantastic against the run by any means. Florida put up good numbers against them in the run. If you get into third and long situations, though, I do not believe that our offensive line can hold up against LSU's pass rushers consistently. You can get wins here and there, but I don't like those odds if you're having to throw the ball in obvious passing situations consistently. Just to kind of let you know what Florida did to them. Lagway was 13 of 26 for 226 yards passing and a touchdown. Their running back had 6 carries for 65 yards. other running back had 6 carries for 37 yards, and then 2 carries for 14 yards between their 3 running backs. They just had a day. I mean, they really did. They were able to hold up against LSU's D-line, did a really good job. I think that gave me a lot of hope. I wasn't an LSU believer. I said a couple weeks ago on this podcast that this was our most winnable game left on the schedule. I still believe that after Auburn. That was my take, that this game was the most winnable game we had left, even though it's in Death Valley. If Diego's not completely healthy, which I don't think he will be, I think he's at best 80%. I think you give Johnson a lot of snaps in the run game. Let his speed try to carry the weight of your running game and just see if he can't bust a couple long ones. If Nate Johnson could come in for 15 plays and just give you one explosive touchdown run, and he has the speed. Go back and watch the game against Texas when Nate Johnson comes in for 2 plays, when I believe Diego Pavia got his helmet knocked off. He takes an 11-yard carry, and a lot of people, if you're just a casual football fan, you're going to watch that 11-yard carry and be like, oh, that was okay. Watch the angles that the linebackers and the safeties had on him, and he runs by SEC linebackers and safeties like they're group of 5 players. The dude has elite speed. You need a player like that at Vandy that can turn what should be a 12-yard gain into a 60-yard gain, or what should be a 25-yard gain into a 50 or 60, 70, 80-yard gain. You need that guy. You need those kind of plays. A lot of Vanderbilt fans have been picking about Vanderbilt's running backs. They're not able to do that. The 30-yard gain is just going to be a 30-yard run play. Our running backs don't have the breakaway speed like Keyshawn Vaughn had a couple years ago to break it 60, 70 yards. They're not that kind of guy. So I think you may have to rely on Nate Johnson this week. I would like to see you kind of keep Diego Pavia as healthy as possible for the last 2 games, the Bowl and UT. So bring Nate in if you have to. But I have a lot of high hopes for this game. I think Vanderbilt matches up relatively well. If you give Nuss all day to throw, though, I think he will pick you apart. But he's also known under pressure to do stupid stuff. So rattle him early, try to get him on their heels. Also, this fan base, I believe, the LSU fan base is dying to turn on Brian Kelly. They are dying to do it. A lot of them, I think, are on the fence. Can this guy get it done down here in Baton Rouge? Give them a reason to hate this man by halftime. Give them a reason to leave.
If there's not enough reasons already to hate Brian Kelly, not only does he cuss out there's a video of Brian Kelly cussing out a player every week. It feels like he literally killed someone when he was at Notre Dame. He's just a jerk, and he's not a good football coach.
Yeah, I put Brian Kelly down there with Hugh Freeze. I believe both dudes are scumbags.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't like Brian Kelly. Even though Clark Lee does pay him a lot of respect for his time at Notre Dame, I don't like him. I hope he loses. They also try to display gold jerseys when we're literally the gold team. You don't wear gold. You wear some like off-brand yellow. LSU, your jerseys suck. Even though you do have really cool jerseys most of the time, this week you suck. I like the matchup here. I really do. I think Vanderbilt's more healthy than they've been since we played Bama. I think this is going to be the most healthy Vanderbilt team you're going to see. If Vanderbilt's offense doesn't give you production this week, I will have a lot of red flags and questions in the Tennessee preview and after the Tennessee game and into the bowl week and into next year if it's not fixed for the Tennessee and bowl game. I think you leave a lot of questions, a lot of things to be desired from this program if the offense doesn't get going. You've had 2 weeks to throw some kinks in to get some guys healthy. I'm not holding it against you because you got stood up by South Carolina when I believe they're the best defensive line in the country. So I'm not that mad, but it's just you can't. The offensive production has dipped every week since Bama. That can't happen. We kind of question Heupel's coaching and what he's been calling offensively. I think at this point you have to ask Beck for Vanderbilt the same question. The offensive production cannot continue to dip. Maybe some of that's because Diego Pavia hasn't been as healthy to run all the time. He hasn't always kept it because maybe he's scared of his health. I don't know. But if he's not completely healthy, he doesn't need to be out there. If that's your excuse, then it's a bad one. That's the best way to put it. Don't use that player's health as an excuse. I think Diego Pavia is tough as nails. If he's out there, I think he's giving it his all. So don't try to protect him. If he needs protecting, bring him to the sideline. That's just my take on it. I love Diego Pavia. That's not a slight towards him at all. But that's just kind of my overview. I'm not going to get too deep into the game. Watch the pass rush in this game. I think that's probably the key. Watch the pass rush for LSU and Vandy. If they can get going, and as far as that goes, if Vandy can get going with the pass rush and can stop LSU's pass rush, then I think you have a really good chance to win this game. I think, like I said, LSU's dying to turn on this man, and you've caught him in a great spot. You're coming off 2 weeks rest. They're coming off a loss. I love this spot for Vandy. Very similar to the Bama game. You're coming off 2 weeks rest in the opposite effect, though. With Bama, they're riding high from Georgia. LSU is plummeting. Can you put the nail in the coffin for Brian Kelly? Please do it for me. You did it against Hugh Freeze. I was so happy. Do it to one more scumbag, and I'll be really happy. If Vanderbilt, I said this a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to reiterate. Vanderbilt goes 7-5 this year. It's the best season we've had in my lifetime as far as overdoing expectations. A lot of, you can argue Franklin's second season where he went 8-4. Nobody was expecting us to win that many games. I believe our over-under that year was like 4 wins or something, and he won 8 and then 9 with the bowl. This year, your over-under was 2 wins, 2.5 wins. They did not expect you to win 3 games this year. And you're going to win 7 if you beat LSU or Tennessee. And I do believe you just match up better with LSU. Tennessee throws the ball more. That's not your strong suit defensively. You want teams to run the ball. You want time to go off the clock. So you just match up better with LSU. I think you got to get the win here.
Yeah, bad spot for LSU. 3 straight losses. Brian Kelly sucks. Livy Dunn is kind of mid. Paul Skeens is on steroids. Very obviously. Okay. You can't just add 4 miles per hour to your fastball as like a 6-year senior in college. Tommy Tanks.
Skeens?
Looks like Theodore from Alvin and the Chipmunks.
This is me praising the Lord because Britt's hating on LSU, and I love it. So this is me praising the Lord.
Mike the Tiger died. He's not even alive anymore.
Yeah, live tigers at stadium is stupid. The governor or whoever said that was the only tiger to show up. That was funny. That's the only thing they have going for them as I throw my phone down. But, yeah, LSU If for the record, if we would have been on this podcast last week, I had on my notes down to South Carolina. I had Vanderbilt was going to lose 24-10. Just to have that prediction out there that Vanderbilt would have lost 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry. Vanderbilt would have lost to South Carolina 24-10. I've been pretty spot on with Vanderbilt predictions this year. Happy to say that it's been a pretty good year outside of Bama, of course, and Georgia State. But every other game, I believe I've predicted correctly. I didn't like the Missouri chances. Called a close game against Texas. Liked the Auburn win. Didn't like South Carolina. With all that being said, just to hype myself up a little bit, Brian Kelly, Baton Rouge, the city of New Orleans, the whole entire state of Louisiana, get ready to learn dynamite, buddy. I like the Doors this weekend. Doors on top. Vanderbilt 24, LSU 17. We win. Get ready to learn dynamite, buddy. That's all I got to say.
Okay. You want to do some gambling picks?
Let's do some gambling picks.
Tennessee does play UTEP Saturday, by the way.
Yes, Tennessee does play UTEP. Here's the keys for Tennessee. Win, don't get anyone hurt. Simple.
That's it. I'll do my gambling picks first since I usually don't because I actually have them ready this week because Joseph made me before we started recording.
Go ahead, Brett.
Give me in the 2 games that Tennessee needs, give me the opposite. Give me Ole Miss money line at Florida, noon game in the Swamp. Give me Penn State to cover -11 at Minnesota. James Franklin cannot win big games. You can say whatever you want to about James Franklin. He takes care of teams like Minnesota, and he normally takes care of business. Give me the over in the Colorado-Kansas game, over 59.5. It's kind of a sneaky big game here. Colorado looking to win the Big 12. Kansas is hot right now. So over 59.5. And for my last pick, 4 picks this week, give me Vanderbilt plus 7.5 at LSU.
Yes, that line started at plus 10.5. I really like either place you get in. I like both of those numbers. Starting off, opposite of Britt here, give me Florida plus 10.5 against Ole Miss. Sprinkle the money line. Really like that. Like Florida to win outright. I I do believe in like 90% of the worlds they cover this 10.5. I'm not a believer in Ole Miss completely, even though they beat Georgia. They've laid the egg too much. We talked about it earlier. They lost to Kentucky. That says enough for me. Florida's getting hot. I think DJ Lagway, I think right now, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I believe in DJ Lagway. I think he's going to be the best quarterback in the country come 2 years from now. That dude is phenomenal. He's making throws that no one else makes their true freshman year. He is just very, very good. Remind you, they just beat LSU. He could not move, which is his number one strength, and he still shredded them. So that enough for me is enough to point to him and say, I think he's going to be phenomenal. Give me Florida plus 10.5. Give me UNLV money line over San Jose State this week. It's a really close spread. I think it's a big UNLV win. Indiana plus 14.5 against Ohio State. That's another one. I've already talked about it, but I think they could win outright. Really like them plus 2 touchdowns. It's an 11 a.m. game. The Horseshoe is not intimidating to play at. I'm not scared of Ohio State or Ryan Day. Give me Indiana. Northwestern, I love the Big Ten this week. Northwestern at Michigan. Give me Michigan money line once again. Northwestern sucks. Northwestern sucks. Michigan is not good, but they're better than Northwestern. Final game, already talked about it. Get ready to learn dynamite, buddy. Give me the Doors money line. That parlay turns out to plus 1,600. $10 wins you 160. Really simple there. We like some underdogs this week. We like some regular picks. Also, let me just go ahead and say this because Britt had to bring it up, so I will go ahead and say this. It's not close. I've argued other years the opposite way because it was true. I'll argue it this way this year because it's true. The SEC is the best conference in college football this year, and it's not relatively close. If you think otherwise, you have not been watching college football. It's that simple. When Michigan is as bad as they are in the Big Ten, and they're bad, and you don't have another team step up to the echelon they're normally on, which you could have thought might have been Penn State this year, but Drew Aller isn't good, and Penn State has James Franklin as their head coach, so it just wasn't going to happen. But anyways, point being that when no one steps up and takes their spot, the Big Ten takes a significant drop-off. They added Washington, and they also suck. So Big Ten's not very good. The ACC sucks. The Big 12's not good. SEC easily the best team in the conference. When I'm picking Vandy over a lot of teams in your conference as the 8th or 9th team in ours, you're not very good. So, SEC best conference in the nation, argue with the wall because I won't argue about it. I think there's been an argument in other years. Me and Brett have been in disagreements about it, but this year I just don't think there's an argument for who's the best team in the or who's the best conference in the country. So, we'll see what happens next year, but for now, the SEC's on top, Doors on top, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening.
Thank y'all for listening. We appreciate y'all.
By my calculations, we've got probably 2 podcasts left after this one. So
love that.
Soak it up.
Soak it up. Enjoy it. It's been a wild ride here on Where's the Line. I've had a great time. We'll do a special little send off last EP for sure. But for now, enjoy your week. Enjoy your weekend. May your football teams win this weekend. May God bless you. Y'all have a good one. Anchor down.
Go Vols. See you guys. Go Gators as well.
Go Gators.